everybody, this is Meredith from the Witty Gritty Paper Co, and today we're going to be talking about the different types of masking that are available to you when you are watercoloring. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the different methods and then I'm going to demo them. So hopefully that will give us the most complete knowledge of what's available to you. So the first method, and this might sound, super basic, but it's true, is just painting around things. If you have a really basic shape, then you might not have to break out anything fancy at all. You might just be able to paint right around it and you don't have to mask it off. So let's start demoing that one. So what I've got here is just a little preliminary sketch of a little mountain range. So with the method that I just mentioned, just painting around things, we're going to start at the sky. First thing I'm going to do is wet the sky area. I'm not using any fancy paper today, just my basic practice stuff. What I'm doing here is I'm just painting right around my mountains. I'm not sure how well you guys are going to be able to see this because it's kind of a faint sketch, but you'll see what I mean once I start dropping in pigment. One thing that is important if you're just going to paint around a shape, though, is that you want to have a brush with a nice pointy tip. So like this is a very nice round brush here. This is my favorite. Pulls to a nice tip so I can get around objects easily. All right. So now the area is all wet. I'm going to grab some color I've already mixed. I'm going to start dropping it in at the top. And see, it's only going to flow in the area that I got wet. It's not going to go down into my mountains. And I can help it along a little bit, but I want it to be darkest at the top. See, we're just painting right around those mountains. We're not masking them off with anything because they're a pretty basic shape. So I recommend the painting around it method just for basic shapes. If you have anything complicated, then you might want to break out something a little bit more specialized. All right, I'm going to leave that alone. Don't want to overwork it. And we'll go on to the next method. So the next option you have for masking things off is masking tape. And I like to use this particularly for borders, like I've got here. If you've watched my channel for a while, you know that I do this with a lot of my pieces. I mask off the edges, and then when I pull it off, I have a nice white border at the end. So that's one good use for it. Another thing you can do, which I'm going to demonstrate, is you can use it to get a really nice sort of organic decal edge. I'll show that to you in just one second. And this stuff is pretty easy to find. I prefer this off-white stuff. It's called contractor's tape or high-adhesive masking tape. Painter's tape also works. I just personally prefer this stuff. I feel like painter's tape is a little bit crispier to the touch. And painter's tape is made to work with house paint, which is a lot thicker and more viscous than watercolors, which is, the thickness of water, basically, which is water thin. So, I just prefer this. I think it works a little bit better. You can use painter's tape, though, if that's what you have. That's okay. And this also comes in thinner rolls. This is a 2-inch roll, but I bought the 1-inch rolls in the past, too. So it's just up to you. You can also do stripes with it if you buy the thinner stuff, or the thicker stuff, I guess, if you wanted. Or just to get a straight edge. So if you're not comfortable painting a straight edge, you just take a piece of this, pull it out, strap it down, paint against it, pull it off, you'll have a straight edge. So it's got a couple uses. So let me just absorb a puddle here. I see a puddle forming in my sky and I want to get rid of it. I'm just going in with a dry brush. I'm wiping my brush off camera. I'm just sucking up a little bit of that extra pigment because I don't want to get a bloom. I don't want any puddles. Okay. So let's demo the masking tape now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off a piece that is about the length of my little painting here. So here's my piece. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip this piece in half lengthwise. And I kind of want it to have a messy edge. I'm not looking for it to be even. I want it to be messy. And it loves to stick to itself, so this isn't particularly easy to do. Then I'm going to look at my two pieces. I'm going to decide which one I like better. I think that I will use the smaller one. I'm going to just put that right there. And you'll see why. So I'm gently pressing it down in the middle of my paper. All right, now I'm going to go in with this sort of dark green. It's called Hooker's Green. I'm going to use it to make some foliage here. So this time I'm not wetting the paper first because I don't want this to really flow too much. I want it to be more foliagey. And so I'm sort of pouncing my brush around. I think that's a good way to get bush texture. I don't want to just paint it straight on there. Let me grab a darker green too. And this is just an example painting. This isn't really a tutorial. We're just looking at the different ways you can use things. So now I could just paint the shape here where I have it masked off. I could just paint that freehand if I wanted to, but if I want to make sure I get a nice deckled edge without very much trouble, then this is an easy way for me to do it. All right, now we're going to let that dry, and we will move on to the third and last method. Okay, now this method is, I think, the least beginner friendly because first of all, it involves a pretty specialized tool. So this is art masking fluid. I've also heard it called FRISKET. I don't know why, but it might say FRISKET on your bottle. And my brand is Winsor Newton. Now, full disclaimer, I haven't used other brands, so because I like this one fine, but I haven't heard of any being bad. I think they're pretty even across the board. So the first thing to know about masking fluid is you absolutely have to keep it capped at all times. It will dry out on you, and it will dry out fast. So when you're not using it, make sure you got that cap on there. The second thing to note is that the stuff really doesn't smell very good. So if you're going to work with it, you want to work in a really well ventilated area. So also, I'm fighting with the cap off camera, you want to be careful that you don't let masking fluid collect in the cap because it will be really hard to get off. See, look, that's gross. It's all dried up in there. It will be really hard to get off if masking fluid gets around your rims. See, a little bit of mine is around there and it was kind of a challenge to get it off. So that's one thing to note, is that it is sticky stuff and it doesn't smell very good. But if you are going to use it, there are certain things that it's just super, super helpful for. So, all right, so what I like to do is I like to pour a teeny bit into a bottle cap. Now you don't have to do this. You can dip right in. This is just my personal preference because I like the fact that I can just toss the bottle cap when I'm done. I don't have to try to pour it back in. So I've got like a teeny little pot of it, and I'm going to close my masking fluid right back up again because you really don't want this stuff to spill. I spilled this the other day, and it is like a nightmare to get off of the floor. So, so be careful. So that's another reason to use the bottle cap. When you're going to use this stuff, you have a couple options. First of all, you can use a really junky brush, like buy a big value pack of those cheap brushes at the big box craft store. And you can use those because this ruins bristles. It will ruin your nice brushes unless you do this one cool trick that I just found out about. So this is a nice professional watercolor brush. This isn't a junky brush. And if I want to use it with my masking fluid, there's one teeny little trick that makes it totally fine to use it with it. So I'm going to get it wet. All my little bristles are wet. And I'm just going to roll it around in this little bar of soap. This is just from my kitchen. This is not a fancy brush cleaning soap. It is just a little bit of bar soap. Now I want to get the bristles as coated as I possibly can when I'm doing this. So I'm just rolling it around. I don't want tons of it, but I do want it coated. All right. So when I feel like it's all coated, it's ready to use with my masking fluid. And really, this trick will save your brushes. If you don't do this, it will ruin your brushes. So please, please, please don't skip this step. Your nice brushes will thank you later. All right, so I'm going to dip right into my masking fluid. And the other thing, when you're using this with an artist brush, or really any brush, you really don't want to get the masking fluid up into this metal part, which is called the ferrule. You don't want to do that. That will kind of destroy your brush too. So that's the other reason I like to work in the bottle cap. It just gives me a little shallow area to dip in. And what I'm going to use this for today is I'm going to paint in the white snowy areas of my mountain range here. And I don't have a reference photo or anything. I'm just working sort of where I think that the snow would collect. And you want a thick enough coat of this, not super thick, but you know, thick enough so that it will pull off all in one piece. And I'll demo how to pull it off too when we're done here. Now make sure when you are painting masking fluid that you are painting it on a dry paper area. It will be bad if you paint it into wet paint. So I got to be very careful that I do not touch my sky here, which is still wet. All right, where else do I want some? Let's just dab some more in. And this is just one example of how you can use it. You can use it in so many different ways. I've seen people do some really cool sort of line art with it. Like they'll do a sketch and they'll paint it all in masking fluid. Then they'll paint a big wash over it and then pull the masking fluid off, and it's just sort of white line art. It's very cool looking. And I personally use masking fluid the most to preserve really light highlights in portraits. I really like to have it in portraits, in pet portraits and people portraits, all the portraits. And I also find it extremely useful when I'm painting shiny objects like gemstones, ornaments, marbles, anything like that. Glass. I really like to have masking fluid in my arsenal for those kinds of paintings. So this is just one way you can use it. There are lots of ways. And masking fluid is a little pricey. I think it was $12.99 for that little bottle I showed you. So it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but it does take you a long time to go through it. So, and you don't have to pour out as much as I did in this bottle cap. I'm sure I poured more than I will need. So it lasts a long time. You get a pretty good bang for your buck. All right, I think I'm just about happy with my masking fluid snow here. Maybe one more touch of it there. Okay. All right, now we're going to pause and we're going to let this all dry, and I'll come back and I'll show you what's next. All right, guys, we're back. I took a little break, had a cup of coffee, and came back, and now everything is all dry. And the way you know when your masking fluid is dry is it should have become a little bit more transparent. So my masking fluid is slightly tinted yellow. So it's like a transparent yellow here, and it should also be tacky to the touch, kind of like nail polish that isn't 100% dry. And also, there are other types of masking fluid. You can buy ones that are tinted blue or tinted magenta, or you can buy ones with a fine applicator tip attached to them, which is nice. I'll probably pick up one of those in the future because I think that would be really useful. But this bottle cap and brush method is great because you can use any size brush you have to paint with your masking fluid. Then you're not stuck with just the fine tip applicator. You can use whatever you want to use. So, and one more thing before we go on here is please, please, please do not use a heat tool or a hair dryer to speed up the drying process when you're using masking fluid, because if you do, your masking fluid can like stick itself permanently to your paper. It'll cement itself on there. It will never come off. So then you will be sad. So just make sure that you aren't impatient. Just let it dry naturally. Wait till it's tacky. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull off this masking tape from our other little method here. And you see I'm getting that nice, natural, sort of deckled shrubbery edge. It looks very organic. I like to do that because it helps me not paint in a straight line. Helps it look more natural. Okay, so before we pick up our masking fluid, we got to paint over it. Grab the brush I was using earlier. You can use a smaller brush if that makes you feel more comfortable. And I'm using Payne's Gray for this part. And I'm going to start right near my shrub line here. paint a nice sort of thick stripe of it. Then I'm going to grab some water and I'm going to pull this color up gently into my mountain range. And you can paint right over your masking fluid. It will resist it. I'm just using plain water here to coax that color up into the mountain range. I might add a little bit more just to help define a couple edges. And again, this is just a little practice, fun, preliminary sketch. This isn't really a formal tutorial. All right, so I'm going to cover up all the areas that I've masked. I'm going to paint right over the top of them. My sky is dry too, so I don't have to worry about getting into that. And the reason we want it to be darkest at the bottom is that the bottom of the mountain range is closest to us. So colors fade and get lighter the farther away they are. So if the bottom of the range is dark, it's going to look to our eyes like it's closer to us. Make sure I have enough paint here. I want to be able to really see the resist that I spent so much time making with the masking fluid. Let me get that tip of that mountain. There we go. All right, now I want to wait for this gray paint to dry here before I take off my masking fluid. So let that dry completely. And in the meantime, we will go on and we'll work on just this little foreground here. So I think I'm going to have a little bit of a beach and a river going on here. I'm thinking that this mountain range is probably Alaska. I didn't really decide. I just said I want to do a mountain range. All right, let's do the beach first. Feel free to skip ahead if you guys don't want to watch this part. You can just skip ahead to when I remove the masking. That's totally fine. I will not be offended. All right, paint in some beach. I love this color. It's, what is it called? I think it's called Raw Green Umber. It's very interesting. It's from this line of watercolors called Rublev. They're new to me. I believe they're a Russian brand, and they're only made out of the exact ingredients that the traditional watercolor masters used. So they're sort of like Renaissance watercolor paints. And they're very cool. They're very earthy colors they have because they're not dye-based. So very cool stuff. And I love this color here. This is just right from the tube. I didn't mix this, and I think it's a very good northern beachy kind of look. Because actually there are a lot of beaches in the north. You don't think of it. You think of beaches as tropical, but there are a lot of them. All right, let's grab some more vibrant green here. And let's keep this loose. We'll just add a little bit brighter life here in the foreground, sort of fading into the beach. I'm going to let the two mingle because shorelines aren't completely straight or tidy. This is nice. I love this color. It's one of my favorites, this bright chartreusey green. It's called green gold. I love it. It is so pretty. All right, and then we will add in our river water here. I won't be using it right now, but a great use for masking fluid is to do sort of the sparkles in water. It's very, very handy for that. It looks super cool. You can use salt too. Salt will help your water look sparkly. What I kind of like to do is I like to dry brush. So I'm going to try to get all the extra moisture out of my brush. I'm working off camera. And this will work really great if you're working on a cold press or a rough paper. You just want to sort of drag the pigment around and sort of let it catch on the tooth of the paper. So I'm not looking for like super realistic here. I just want to get the general idea that it's a body of water here. I feel like it needs to be a little darker. Maybe we'll bring in some sky color so it looks more like it's reflecting. Let's make it straight across the bottom. I think that I will grab some salt, add a little bit of that to the water, and I'm going to let my mountains dry, and we'll come back and I'll show you how to remove the masking fluid. All right, everybody, we're back here for the last time, and all we have left to do is remove our masking fluid and see how it looks. So I added in our water, and I shaded the mountains a little bit more off camera. And there are a couple ways you can remove masking fluid. I've seen a lot of artists who like to use this little square. It's called a rubber cement pickup. Personally, though, I really just like my fingers because I find that whenever I use one of these, you can sort of see it on the corners. It is so abrasive, it kind of drags the actual paint around, and I don't like that. So I just like to use my fingers because I feel like it's a lot gentler. So I'm just going to rub, and it comes off usually in these little stringy bits. Just going to gently rub my finger across it, and it comes up pretty easy, and it sticks to itself, so it's pretty easy to get off in big pieces. And that's the reason you want to make sure you paint it on thick enough, because otherwise it won't come off in one big piece. So there we go. Now our mountains are snowy. And what I would usually do, and I guess I'll do it now, what I would usually do after I take off my masking fluid is I actually add just the tiniest bit of shading within the areas I've preserved, just because it almost looks a little too stark when you take it off. So you certainly don't have to do this, but I think I'll just do a teeny bit of it, particularly since snow is really not pure white. It's always reflecting the colors around it. So just add a little bit of shading to it to make it look more realistic. And I would say that this painting is pretty much done. So I hope you guys have learned something about the different options you have for masking. And if you have any other questions, be sure to leave them in the comment section and I will get back to you. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day. Bye!